अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरुं श्रीयुतः पदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथां वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धु जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधाकांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। हरे कृष्णा। I'd like to welcome all of you all to our Gita class. We are on chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled as Transcendental Knowledge. And today we are going to complete this chapter. So this chapter is divided into 4 parts. The first part is called Eternal Education, then Accurate Understanding, then Removing Reactions, and the 4th part is Sacrifices. So we had discussed elaborately all the different types of sacrifices the last time we met. And we concluded by talking about how we can learn what sacrifice we need to do in our lives. So last time I had spoken about briefly about the concept of the spiritual master. So essentially a person is very confused in life most of the times, and generally the tendency when we take up spiritual life is that the confusion that is externally there in all aspects of life percolates into spiritual life also, and therefore people always look for an easy way out. People always look for some way where they can practice spiritual life easily and they can give up their responsibilities also without feeling any guilt. So just like a person who is married, a man might say that, like there are many people we often meet, they say that we want to give up our family and come to temple and stay with you all. So he wants to give up wife, responsibilities and stay. Or sometimes a woman might say that I want to become Mirabai, घूमना है बस कृष्ण के प्रेम में. So essentially it's what we need to do, how much we need to do, and what we need to give up, when we need to give up, and when we should not give up, what we should never give up, why to give up. All these are questions that always occur when one is interested in practicing spiritual life. And therefore Krishna explains the practical way of dealing with all this. The way Krishna explains is that he talks about you not having the intelligence to decide, but rather taking shelter of a spiritual master who can guide us. And therefore this very important verse Krishna speaks in the Gita, Tadviddhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshantite jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshina. He says, just try to learn the truth by approaching a spiritual master. Inquire from him submissively and render service unto him. The self-realized soul can impart knowledge unto you because they have seen the truth. So here the spiritual master is called Tattvadarshi. Darshan means seeing, Tattvadarshi means seeing the truth. So, the one who has seen the truth has to live by the truth also. So, there are many people who may see the truth but may not live by the truth. They may even live by the truth but they not realize the truth themselves. So, bona fide spiritual master is somebody whose knowledge is not just bookish, but that knowledge, that bookish knowledge has been converted into wisdom, and then it has been converted into realization. And therefore, when you approach such a bona fide spiritual master and ask that person, which yajna should I do? What sacrifice should I do? Last time we discussed about all the different types of sacrifices, Dravyamaya yajna, Tapamaya yajna, Jnanamaya yajna and all that. And so when you approach a spiritual master and you ask the spiritual master what I need to do, how much I need to give up, for what I need to give up, and a detailed understanding of how it can be relevant to my life. And therefore, spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada explains in this particular verse, there are three things how one should approach a spiritual master. So, one is Pranipat, Pariprashna and Sevaya. These are three words that are in connection with the spiritual master and disciple. The word Pranipat means humble surrender. That means when I go to the spiritual master, the first thing I go with a humility that I don't know. So if I go with a feeling that I already know, then you don't need to go to a spiritual master. You don't need to approach a guru. So when we approach a spiritual master, it's not that just we go. First we go with humility, and then second, after exhibiting humility, is Sevaya. What can I do for you? Srila Prabhupada met his guru Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur about 11 times in his life. That's it. Can you imagine how powerful Srila Prabhupada became eventually, like a world acharya? But if you look at his connection with his guru, he met him only 11 times. And in all the 11 interactions that he had with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Prabhupada never asked one question. Prabhupada said, there was only one question in his entire life he asked his spiritual master. And that question is very interesting. You know what is the question he asked? How can I serve you? That's it. If you look from our point of view, we have so many doubts that keep coming in our mind, so many things we keep asking, but the most important thing we never ask only, how can I serve you? And Srila Prabhupada never asked any question. The only question he asked is, how can I serve you? And can you imagine what a personality he became? What kind of a disciple he became in his life? And therefore, people, when they go to the spiritual master, first of all, they don't go in the mood of Pranipat. And then they definitely have no desire to serve at all. There is no question of Sevaya. And then the only thing that is left is Pariprashna. That means asking questions. And the word Pariprashna means submissive inquiry. That means the type of questions you ask also has to be asked in the right mood. It's not that just you ask questions. The questions has to be asked in the right mood, in the right consciousness. And therefore, most people, Srila Prabhupada talks about, either they do blind following, or if they ask questions, they ask absurd questions. Absurd questions means totally irrelevant to the spiritual master's presence in their lives. And these questions make no sense at all, because even if you get an answer to those questions, it's not going to help you in your spiritual life. Like for example, somebody might ask that Krishna was born to Vasudeva and Devaki in the jail. Now why Kamsa put them in the same jail? He can put them in two different jails. Then there is no question of child being born only. So now if you go to a spiritual master and ask this question, why Kamsa did not put both of them in the same jail? This is known as absurd inquiry. Is it relevant to you in your life? And even if it is, even if the spiritual master gives some answer, will you accept it? So essentially, most people who ask such questions, absurd questions, they don't have an desire to follow only. So there is no question of pranipad, they are not humble about it. And there is no question of sevaya, they are not wanting to serve the spiritual master. They want to just show that I am better than the guru. I can ask such questions that the guru won't have an answer. They approach a spiritual master with that attitude, and therefore they never really grow. When Vishwamitra came to Dasharath Maharaj in the Ramayana, Vishwamitra, he asked Dasharath Maharaj, how is everything going on? And Dasharath Maharaj, he gives a very interesting answer. He says, everything is going fine, but the only thing that I need to do is I need to learn how to conquer my ignorance. There was a king named Nimi, very powerful personality. And these Navayogendras, who are considered to be 9 very powerful personalities, they came to Nimi's house. And Nimi, he never asked them this question, how are you? He asked them spiritual questions and he got powerful spiritual answers. The 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is almost 3 chapters of the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam is based on King Nimi's questions to the Navayogendras. So essentially, when a guest comes to our house, we ask that person, how are you? When we meet somebody, we ask the person, how are you? But when you come in front of the spiritual master, you never ask the question, how are you? You ask the question, how am I? When you go to a doctor, you don't ask the doctor, how are you? You go to a doctor because you are sick. So many times when we don't understand this, the spiritual master is a doctor and he is going to help us with our disease, our sickness. Don't go to the spiritual master thinking that he is just one more person in your life. Don't ask him question, how are you? That question is irrelevant to your asking. The question I have to ask to the spiritual master is, how am I? Then the spiritual master will tell you all your problems immediately. And therefore, when we go to a doctor with a running nose, when we go to a doctor with a swollen eyes, we have no time to ask the doctor, how are you? Because we are frustrated with our situation, our bad health. Naturally, we are telling our symptoms only. The same is when you come to the spiritual master. Because physically we may be fine, but spiritually are we fine? And therefore the only person who can answer your question whether you are spiritually fine or no is a guru. And there you don't go and show your intelligence by asking, how are you? You are not going to a spiritual master to ask his health update. You are going to a spiritual master to ask him, how am I faring in my spiritual life? How is my health update? So, when we go to the spiritual master and submissively inquire from the spiritual master, then the spiritual master tells you which yajna to follow. Dravyamaya yajna, Jnanamaya yajna, Tapomaya yajna, Swadhyayamaya yajna. And therefore, the spiritual master is Tadviddi Pranipatena. The word Tadviddi means the spiritual master knows all the sacrifices. He has knowledge, he is Tattvadarshibhi. He has knowledge of all the facts of life, all the spiritual aspects of life. One time we were trying to experiment with making idlis in our kitchen. Now our kitchen is a multifaceted kitchen because we have people from all over India staying here, and naturally whatever you make, some party is dissatisfied. You make some North Indian chole or something like that, South Indian saying, "Are kya chole wapas bana rahe?" And then you make idli sambar, then the North Indian is saying, "Kya wapas idli bana rahe?" You make some Gujarati item, then Punjabi is dissatisfied. You make some Punjabi item, then Maharashtrian is dissatisfied. Somebody other is dissatisfied. So overall, the way we handle it is that every day we make different items for different states. And someday in one plate you will find Punjabi item, South Indian item, Maharashtrian item, Gujarati item, all in one plate. Somehow keep everybody happy and satisfied. So many years back they were trying to make idlis, and all the South Indians would comment, "Ye kya idli hai? Pattar hai. Idli banana aata nahi hai." So naturally, the cooks were very disappointed. They tried their best. Then they called one lady from South India, and she came all the way from South India, and she taught our devotees to make perfect idlis. Of course, after she went back, the idlis were like average, but at least they were not as bad as what they were in the beginning, So there are many ways to learn from a guru. The first way to learn is by hearing the knowledge from a book, a recipe book. Take a recipe book and learn how to make idli. Second way to learn is by hearing the wisdom behind the book. That means if you watch some serial and there is somebody speaking about that recipe book, that's one second level of knowledge. The third level is by if somebody can give you a personal instruction with the water in Maharashtra, with the rice quality in Maharashtra, with the situation in Maharashtra, how to make idli. Personalized instruction. And fourth is by learning a great soul, observing a great soul, doing the act. That is the fourth way of learning. This is exactly the 4 ways of learning in spiritual life also. The first way is sit and read books. No matter how much ever you read books, that knowledge at some extent will remain theoretical. The second way is if you can come and hear regularly how to understand that book properly. That's much deeper than just reading the book. And third is if somebody can give you a personalized instruction, how that understanding from the book can be applied in your life, in your situation, at your level. And fourth is, which is the best way of learning, is if you can observe some great soul in action. Nothing better than that. Nothing better than observing great souls. I would say 95% of what I have learned is just by being around and observing great souls. That's it. You don't have to really, wait for an instruction to come. You don't have to really wait for them to speak to you. Just hang around and observe. And slowly over a period of time, you will, really understand a lot. Therefore, here, Krishna is telling Arjun, Vigata Jwara. He says, give up this unwanted lethargy and get up and fight. So here, essentially, what really is coming out as an important factor is that Krishna is telling Arjun, Krishna is the spiritual master for Arjun at this point of time, and he knows the weakness and the strength of his disciple, and therefore he is giving a personalized instruction to Arjun what he is supposed to do now. And therefore everyone works, but what is important is the consciousness that goes behind the action, behind the work. Every action that you do, just because you work, it is not a spiritual endeavor. Just like if you observe monkeys do a lot of work in one day, jumping around like anything, and the kind of energy they spend in one day is unimaginable. But all that work that they do is not really spiritual endeavor. You can't say that they are really progressing in their spiritual lives. And therefore, all day long we need to work, but in what consciousness we need to work, that we need guidance for. And therefore, the spiritual master is somebody who can really guide us. But unfortunately, the disciple is so lazy to follow the spiritual instruction. Unfortunately, this is the kind of disciples that we have in Kali Yuga. It's not that good spiritual master is not there. The best spiritual master may be there, but that fellow should have some, ability to function, follow the instruction. There was one time one Guru and his disciple, they were in a room, and Guru was lying down, and Guru was feeling that it's going to rain very soon. He had a feeling. So he told his disciples, you go and get all my cloth that is drying outside. It might rain now. So this disciple was very lazy. He said, don't worry, if it rains the cat will come running in, then I'll go and get the cloth. After some time, this guru told his disciple that, put off the lantern, I want to go to sleep. The disciple said, if you want darkness, just close your eyes. Why do you need to put off a lantern, The guru was quite irritated, And after some time, somebody knocked the door. And the guru told the disciple, at least open the door now. The disciple said, I already did 2 work of yours, now third one you only do. So essentially, most people who are trying to be disciples, to put a sincere effort in trying to be a good disciple, trying to really follow the instructions of the spiritual master, you need certain qualities that are internally already present. Guru cannot teach you everything. There has to be something already existing. And then when such a person approaches a bona fide spiritual master, then the bona fide spiritual master will be able to help that person grow. If you don't have certain qualities within you, no matter how perfect your guru is, he can't help you. And therefore, what the spiritual master looks for is for a weak disciple who is spiritually weak, but at least has the right attitude. And therefore, if you study Srila Prabhupada, when he went to the Western world to preach, he was very successful in the Western world and he was an utter failure in India. Before going to America, Prabhupada preached in India for about 6 years. So Prabhupada preached in America for 12 years and he preached in India for 6 years before going to America. And interestingly, in 6 years of preaching in India, Prabhupada made only 1 disciple. After 6 years, And that too, that 1 disciple also was half a disciple actually, He was not following everything what Prabhupada was saying. He would do his own stuff. So in 6 years of preaching, Prabhupada ended up making half a disciple in India. He said, these guys are not going to, understand. Let me go to the West, preach to the Westerners. They are blank slates. And after that, I'll get them over here and then show them. Indians will follow anything Western. If Westerners are chanting Hare Krishna, they'll say, India, barabar hai, acha hi hai, must be good. Anything Western is good, anything American is good. So Prabhupada understood that marketing trick long back, And when he got the Western, European and American devotees to India, people were fascinated. Prabhupada would organize pandal programs just to make the Western disciples dance. And Indians, when they would see Western people wearing dhoti kurta, sari, dancing on stage, they will say, wow, fantastic. If they can do it, we also can do it, Can you imagine, In 12 years that he preached in the Western world, he made 10,000 disciples. And in 6 years preaching in India, half a disciple. Can you imagine the ratio? Unfortunately, the good part for Srila Prabhupada was that he found people who had a lot of weakness. The society had rejected them totally. But Prabhupada saw their strengths. And he made their strengths, their weaknesses, he helped them handle their weaknesses and he focused on their strengths. And then what they created using their strengths, unbelievable. Practically, Prabhupada, if these Western disciples were not there, the kind of dedication that they showed Srila Prabhupada, we would not have had a society like ISKCON today. Somebody came and asked Srila Prabhupada, if you have never had LSD in your life, how do you know it is wrong? How do you know it is bad? It's not good. Prabhupada said, why should I take LSD? All my disciples have taken LSD and they have given it up. So essentially, he saw that they were weak and society had rejected them. So he accepted them, gave them a lot of love and affection, and with their help, he created a revolution. When Srila Prabhupada was preaching in America, at some point he wanted to preach in London. Prabhupada went to America because his guru, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, sent 3 disciples to London, much before Srila Prabhupada. This is the first attempt to try to preach in a country outside India. And all the 3 disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta, they came back after 6 months. And in those 6 months, they were convinced that you cannot preach in the Western world. And when they went, they were funded by Gaudiya Math, their stay and everything was taken care of. And when Prabhupada went, he had nothing at all. The reason Prabhupada chose to go to America was because he said, my godbrothers had failed in London. I don't want to fail in the same place. If I had to fail, let me fail in America, another country. So with that thought, he had gone to America. And of course, by that time, America had become much more important than Britain. So after a few years of preaching in America, he decided that it's time to expand in London. So he sent 3 couples, 6 people basically, 3 young married couples. All of them were practically 3-year-old in the Hare Krishna movement at that point of time. He said, go to London and start preaching there. Now, all of you are already 1-year-old in the Hare Krishna movement now. After 2 years, if you are told, go and start some preaching center somewhere, what will you do? Prabhupada sent them to London. And interestingly, when they went to London under Prabhupada's instruction, they had no money at all. So the condition for entering into London, staying in London, was that they have to show they have 2,000 pounds. So now what they did was, one person entered into London and they showed 2,000 pounds. After they entered London, they sent that money back as it is. Another next person came in and they sent the money back. Third person came in. Like that, 6 people entered London, and after they all came, they sent the 2,000 pounds back. So they had nothing when they entered the country. Nothing. And the only thing they had was books. So they had to sell the books, and whatever money came, they had to survive with that money. So when they entered London, they were living in cardboard boxes on the streets of London, in the cold of London. Can you imagine? And one of them had a small child, small daughter. So in such conditions, they started preaching in London. And in a matter of couple of years, they created a revolution in London practically. Somehow, by Krishna's grace, they met George Harrison, in London. And it was not even a planned meeting. It was a very coincidental meeting. One of the disciples of Prabhupada, Shyam Sundar Prabhu, he decided he wanted to meet George Harrison because he knew that if George Harrison recommends anything, it will become a big hit. So he had gone to the Beatles office just to see if there's a possibility of meeting. And the Beatles people are just not interested. They said, absolutely, there's no time. George doesn't have time. He can't meet anybody. And who are you all? There were nobody actually. Luckily, coincidentally, it's not exactly coincidence, Krishna's arrangement, George Harrison happened to enter that building at the exact same time the Shyam Sundar was going to leave. And as soon as he saw Shyam Sundar Prabhu, the first thing he asked him is, where were you all? I was searching for you for so many years now. So George Harrison, he had gone to America, and somewhere in America he had seen Hare Krishna devotees performing kirtan on the streets. But at that point of time, he couldn't meet them. But he always, that's something that registered in his mind, and he always wanted to meet the Hare Krishna devotees. And here he saw a Hare Krishna devotee. First question he asked him, before asking his name also, where were you? I was searching for you for such a long time. And the immediate connection happened. And of course, George Harrison helped them with one music album, Radha Krishna Temple. And that one album became a best seller in practically, it lasted for almost 10-20 years. It was on the top of the charts because George Harrison sung in that album. And then at some point when the devotees were becoming very, very popular in London, a newspaper wrote an article about them. And the headlines of the article read, the Hare Krishna devotees enter London. And that newspaper they sent to Srila Prabhupada, And Prabhupada was so happy seeing in a prominent newspaper a headline that says Hare Krishna devotees enter London, And then eventually Srila Prabhupada was called to London to help them in preaching. But just try to understand that who are these people? If you see from a society point of view, they were just drug addicts, hippies, they were just rejects in society. But because they got connected to a bona fide spiritual master and they handed over themselves to a bona fide spiritual master, the bona fide spiritual master knew how to utilize their strengths and weaknesses and really do something powerful out of them. And Prabhupada always drove them with one motto. He said, if you are Americans and Europeans, you have to do something big. If you can't do something big, then what is the use of being Americans, you know? And Prabhupada pushed them really hard to do something that they never even imagined, you know. So, essentially, the spiritual master knows our strengths. Just like last time I was talking about the story of this man who didn't have a left arm, and he went to a teacher who taught him how to fight with only one arm. And he taught him one technique, one chopping technique, with which he could win any fight. And this fellow learned that one technique properly. And he went and fought in a massive competition and he won. And at the end of the competition, he asked his spiritual master that, I only knew only one technique. The Guru said, this technique, to counteract this technique, the only way is to catch your left hand. But you don't have a left hand, therefore you won. So essentially, the spiritual master's role is to use your strengths and weaknesses in the exact perfect way. We find that many people today are confused about what sacrifice I need to do. And the spiritual master, if they fortunately meet a spiritual master, then the spiritual master tells them what exactly they need to do as a sacrifice for their spiritual growth, as well as for advancing in this and contributing to society. Rishikesh Mafatlal, who is known as Krishna Chandra Prabhu, when he came into the Hare Krishna movement many years back, about 25 years back, he wanted to give up his opulent building, opulent bungalow, and stay in a small flat. Basically, he knew that spiritual life means detachment. Spiritual life means living in a simple lifestyle. So he was seriously considering giving up his, huge mansion and staying in a small flat. And when he came to his spiritual master and asked him, should I do that? His spiritual master taught him a very interesting type of detachment. He said his detachment is to give up the spirit of detachment. He had to detach himself from being detached. That means he had to adopt the process of being attached to certain things, certain facilities, so that he can show the society how a devotee can survive, can live, in spite of having so much opulence, but still you can live a simple lifestyle. And eventually, if you see now, Krishna Chandra Prabhu, he's become such an influential person in terms of affecting people's lives. That means when you go to his house, if you just look at the kind of lifestyle that he's living, it's as good as living in a small house only. Because they're not attached to that opulence, they're not attached to that, name and fame, but they're using everything in Krishna's service. This other devotee, Madhavananda Prabhu, he is one of the directors of Bhaktivedanta Hospital now. At a certain point, there was a time when they had to set up a new department. This is known as a spiritual care department. So Bhaktivedanta Hospital was just getting formed at that point of time. So they didn't have anybody who can actually handle the spiritual care department. So this devotee, under the guidance of his guru, he actually stepped down from the position of being a director to being a HOD of one department. And that was a newly formed department. So can you imagine what kind of detachment that a spiritual master can teach us? Even to be detached, you need some intelligence. And sometimes you just don't have that kind of intelligence, what to be detached from. George Harrison, as I was telling you, when he met Srila Prabhupada, he actually wanted to take initiation. He wanted to dedicate his life to Srila Prabhupada. He wanted to join the Brahmacharya ashram and become a Brahmachari. So when he went to Srila Prabhupada, he told him, I want to get initiated by you. Prabhupada said, why do you need to get initiated? You're already initiated. Your name is Harrison. Harrison, So you're already initiated. Why do you need to get initiated? George Harrison was completely surprised. Can you imagine if George Harrison became a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, what would be Prabhupada's fame? I mean, people would do anything to have George Harrison as a disciple. And here he is coming and telling, I want to take initiation from you. Prabhupada is saying, no, you're already initiated. Your name is Harrison. Why did Prabhupada do that? The reason Prabhupada did that was because George Harrison, the way he could serve society, the way he could serve Krishna was by his name and fame. So if he got connected to an organization and he got bound by the rules and regulations of the organization, he would really be, the way he would serve would be much lesser than what he could have actually served as a musician, as a famous rock star. And eventually Srila Prabhupada told George Harrison, so George Harrison wanted to join the temple also. Prabhupada said, no, you preach through your music. And after that instruction of Prabhupada, George Harrison started writing music about Krishna. And so many of his songs, even today, people just love them. And so many people became devotees just by hearing George Harrison's songs. Not just in the Western world, even in India. I know so many people who became devotees just by hearing George Harrison's songs. So can you imagine if George Harrison had met the wrong guru, the wrong spiritual master, and he said, I want to surrender to you. What would happen to George Harrison, I mean, definitely would have become a disciple of that guru, and definitely that guru would have got advantage of having George Harrison as a disciple. But George Harrison wouldn't have made the kind of progress that he made, and he wouldn't have been able to contribute the way he contributed. When George Harrison, much later, when Srila Prabhupada was on his deathbed, and last few days before he actually left this world, he remembered George Harrison. He removed his ring and he gave it to one of his disciples and he said, give George this ring. Because George Harrison contributed so much to the Hare Krishna movement, not just through his music. He gave his villa. In London there is a Bhaktivedanta Manor, which is supposed to be one of the biggest temples in India, in the world, even today. And the whole manor was donated by George Harrison to the Hare Krishna movement. And George Harrison funded Prabhupada's first print of the Krishna book. Therefore, if you see in Krishna book, the first, just after the introduction, Prabhupada thanks George Harrison, and there's a small foreword written by George Harrison. Essentially, when the last few days that George left his body, he was chanting the holy names of the Lord, and he was constantly remembering Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's disciples were actually with him while he was on his deathbed. So here, the understanding of what is the art of sacrificing, we need a guidance from a spiritual master. And therefore, there are different ways in which we can work in Krishna consciousness. Essentially, there are two main broad categories. The first broad category is if our work becomes a subset of our Krishna consciousness. The second way is, which most of us are following, Krishna consciousness becomes a subset of our work. So essentially, what are we conscious of when we are working? What are we conscious of when we are taking responsibilities in our lives? What are we conscious of when we are functioning in our lives? If we don't set our priorities, then essentially what will happen is things will just go in an auto mode. Many times, there's one fellow called Brian Dyson. This fellow was the former CEO of Coca-Cola. And he made a very interesting comment. He said, life is like juggling many balls. Work, spiritual life, family, relationships, friends. We have many balls, health, we are juggling many balls. Out of them, one of them is a rubber ball. And all others are glass balls. Which is a rubber ball? Work is a rubber ball. If you drop it, it bounces back. But if you drop any of the others, especially your spiritual life, the glass ball falls, it will shatter and it will crumble. You can never get it back. It's just gone. And therefore, we shouldn't compromise our sadhana. There are many ways to be Krishna conscious even in our workplace. Especially with most people's work being on computers. Life becomes much easier. Screensavers, wallpapers. We can read books. I would read almost every week, at least 2 books in my office. I would manage my time. It's not that I was not working, but I would manage my time in such a way that there are a lot of waste time that you just hang around with people and just waste time. That's the time I would use to read books. And we can have philosophical discussions in office. So many things can be done to be Krishna conscious while you are at your workplace. And therefore, we need to somehow or the other orient our life in such a way that we can make Krishna conscious our priority. Of course, over a period of time, life will come to a certain stage where you can only have Krishna consciousness. That you have to wait for. Till that point of time, somehow or the other, we have to make work a subset of Krishna consciousness. That means we need to function, we need to carry on our work, but at the same time, the priority should be how to remain conscious of Krishna. That should be the priority. Unfortunately, what happens is that the world is a very passionate world, and the world's passion drives our passion. At a certain point, we tend to think that work is priority and Krishna consciousness is okay. It's like a part of our life. Why do we work? If you have enough money and somebody gives you like unlimited amount of money, will anybody go for a job? I don't think so. It's not that people are like super enthusiastic about working and they just love to. Work is something that gives you security financially. It gives you mental security, and it gives you an engagement for your skills, but that's not the purpose for which you're working. So essentially, our priority should be very clear. What is the priority of our life? That should be very clear. Most of the times, we are just confused about what is the priority of our life. And therefore, because we are confused about the priorities of our life, different people set our priorities, especially our boss. Solid priorities they set, because they know that you are confused. But if you are not confused, there is nobody who can set priorities for you. And therefore, it is very important as devotees to keep our priorities very clear. And therefore, we need guidance of the spiritual master. So, as I was saying, there's 3 levels to what spiritual master's role is. First is pranipat, submissive inquiry. If you come to a spiritual master and ask questions, the spiritual master answers them. I don't know whether I shared this story with you all. There was one devotee whose name was Mahabudhi Prabhu. So how he became a disciple of Srila Prabhupada is a very interesting story. This man, he was a very rich person. His parents were like fabulously wealthy, millionaires literally. So he had many doubts of why he should accept a spiritual master. Especially, he was just searching for who can be the right person. So his first doubt was, if somebody is a guru, that person should be able to have knowledge about who God is, and he should be able to read my mind also. And the second thing is, if the person is a guru, he should be able to predict the future also. And he said, so he just had these random thoughts about who a guru is. These are the qualifications he made for himself. If I meet somebody who has all these qualifications, then I'll surrender to that person. So when he went to meet Srila Prabhupada, he was sent into a room where he was the only new person. Rest all were Prabhupada disciples, rest all were sannyasis. So they were many years in the movement and they were very serious devotees. So when he was sitting in the midst, he had long curling hair, typical westernized type of person. And Prabhupada, he started speaking. And the first thing Prabhupada spoke is, he looked at him straight. Out of all the people, he looked at him straight. And he said, why are you a Kripana? This man, he started thinking, what is a Kripana? So now, Prabhupada was speaking, and this man was not even asking anything to Prabhupada. Prabhupada just kept speaking, but everything this person was thinking, Prabhupada was answering one by one. So it was almost like a conversation between the two of them, but this fellow was not speaking at all. So Prabhupada said, why are you a Kripana? Looking at him straight. This person was thinking, what is a Kripana? And Prabhupada immediately answered, Kripana is somebody who is opposite of Brahmana. He said, Kripana means miserly. Why are you acting miserly? This man, immediately he felt Prabhupada asking him the question, because he was a very rich person and he would never utilize his wealth at all. And his family never ever did anything for society, So Prabhupada asked him, why are you miserly? This fellow started thinking, how does he know that I am miserly? And then Prabhupada, he explained that anybody who has the human form of life, but he doesn't know how to utilize it to serve society and serve Krishna, that person is a miserly person. So this fellow, this devotee, this person, he felt Prabhupada is talking to me straight. He said, all that is fine, maybe he is reading my mind. But can he predict the future? Exactly at that time when he had this doubt in his mind, Prabhupada told one of his disciples, get me 12 canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And the disciple got 12 canto of Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada started reading from 12 canto. Predictions about Kali Yuga. What is going to happen in future, This man was totally bewildered. He said, how did he know that I want to know whether he knows the future or no? Just randomly, Prabhupada just started reading predictions about Kali Yuga. And finally, he explained how people in Kali Yuga, they will think that being beautiful means having long hair. And this fool actually had long hair. This person, after this whole experience, he was thoroughly convinced that Prabhupada knew what he was thinking. He could predict the future also. He ran away from that place. He just ran, and he took his car and reached his home. And constantly is going on in his mind, how did this person know what I was thinking? And the next day he came with a check. He wrote a check of $1,000. That time $1,000 was quite a lot. And he gave it to one of Prabhupada's disciples. And he said, give it to Prabhupada. And this disciple, this disciple told, you come and you only give it to Prabhupada. He said, no, I don't have the guts to face him again. So he went and gave the check to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada made only one comment. He said, he has understood. This man, he was so shocked that Prabhupada actually was having a conversation straight with him. That was his experience of, his dealing with the spiritual master. Of course, when you come to the spiritual master, as I said, there is a concept of sevaya. I was talking about these devotees who went to London. Just look at the mood of these people. Can you imagine, first of all, surrendering your life to somebody like that? On top of that, ready to follow anything he says. It's not easy for us at our level. Even if you're told something that is not as complicated and tough as this, it is very difficult to follow. Because the false ego is so strong. The false ego is thoroughly convinced that I know what I want to do in my life. I know how to live my life. I know what is good for me. The false ego cannot accept this concept of surrender. Pranipat. Humbly surrendering oneself. And because these people surrendered themselves, the kind of miracles that were happening in their life was unbelievable. One of these devotees, he's talking about something that happened to him in his life. Shyam Sundar Prabhu was telling about how he met George Harrison. That was one thing. Another time, the temple was, they didn't have money. So they were running just somehow the other to make ends meet. And they were organizing a very big event in the temple. And they were calling some of the biggest people of London, So they randomly started writing letters to really big people and started calling them for a program. And this program was a completely unpredictable program, and it was just random cold calls. They wrote to all the lords, they wrote to all the knights, they wrote to all the ministers, they wrote to all the top level people of London, calling them randomly for a program in the Hare Krishna temple. And the one problem was that the temple didn't have any proper, things. So especially the floor was looking very bad. So they wanted a carpet. And they didn't have any money for the carpet. So they found out that the cost of the carpet was something like 3,000 pounds or something like that, some number. And they had absolutely no money to raise funds for that carpet. And they were thinking, if all these people actually come and they find that the temple floor is so shabby, they will not think good about ISKCON. So one day morning, this is early morning, Mangalarti time, 4:30 in the morning. So Shyam Sundar Prabhu was walking to the temple, from where he was staying, to come and attend Mangalarti. As he was walking, he just took a turn. And as he took that turn, suddenly he saw money flying towards him. So he couldn't believe, what is this? Money is flying, literally flying it was flying in the air, just coming towards him. So he started catching all the currency notes. And somehow he gathered all the currency notes together. And he started looking for, maybe somebody's purse fell off, something happened, because there was a bridge close by, something. So they didn't know what had exactly happened. He couldn't find anyone in the vicinity. Naturally, now he didn't know whom to give the money to. And he counted, it was exactly the same amount they needed to buy the carpet. Can you imagine, what do you call this? For most people, they'll say these are stories that never happened. But this is how the Hare Krishna movement came up. So these people, because they took shelter of the spiritual master so much. There was one disciple of Srila Prabhupada whose name was I don't know if did I tell you all this story about this French actress who became a devotee? So you should hear this story. Again, the story of Sevaya and surrender to the spiritual master. There was one lady who was an actress. She was from Australia, but she was a French. So this lady was very successful actress in the Hollywood industry. And at some point she came to America to do some shooting. And after her shooting got over, she was on her way out back to Australia. So she was in the airport and her luggage was in the airport, and somehow or the other in the airport she met some devotees who were distributing books. So she got very inspired, intrigued by them, and there was some delay in her flight. So the devotees told her, why don't you come to the temple, have some prasad, be with us for some time. So this lady actually came to the temple, and there Srila Prabhupada was there. And she met Srila Prabhupada, she spent time with the devotees, she heard the philosophy a little bit. And when she met Srila Prabhupada, she was so touched by the experience that she had with Srila Prabhupada. She actually felt that she found a father. She decided to stay back for some more time. And she stayed in the temple, stayed just like with the regular devotees. She would go out on Harinams on the streets. And she began to like the lifestyle so much that she never really went back. Her luggage remained in the airport forever, and she became a proper devotee, dressed in sari, wearing tilak, regular lifestyle of a devotee. At a certain point, the newspapers, the media, they came to know that this actress has, joined the Hare Krishna temple. So they did a feature on her, and they wanted to come to the Hare Krishna temple to photo shoot her and interview her. But this lady was just not interested. So she just somehow avoided and told everybody to, tell that she's not there. But somehow this fellow, this photographer, he found her in the kitchen. And she was washing vessels in the kitchen, sitting on the floor, washing vessels, wearing a sari. And this fellow took a photo. And the next day in the newspapers, big news. Actress turns into a Hare Krishna devotee, And there were two photographs. One, the previous photograph as an actress, extremely good looking, extremely well decked up. And second, the photo of, as a devotee, with the sari and all that. The next day when the newspaper came, she was feeling so ashamed to show the newspaper to Prabhupada, because she didn't want to show her previous, attire to Prabhupada. But somehow the devotees went and showed Prabhupada the newspaper. And Prabhupada, when he saw the newspaper, the first comment he made was, he asked the disciples, in which photo does she look better? In the first one or the second one? Then naturally everybody said the first one. Prabhupada said, no, she looks better than the second one. Because that is the constitutional position of a Jivatma. Of a living entity's constitutional position is when you are doing humble menial service to Krishna. That is the time when the living entity looks most beautiful. And Prabhupada actually told us, you look much more beautiful in this photo. Eventually, a couple of years later, Prabhupada told her to get married to one disciple of his, whose name was Burijan Prabhu. Now, this person whom he asked her to get married to, he was an American, but he was preaching in Japan. Prabhupada had asked him to go to Japan and preach. This lady, she never even saw that devotee in her life. Never ever met him. Prabhupada said, you marry him? She just said yes. And Prabhupada, now the marriage had to happen. So she had to go to Japan to get married. So she said, all the devotees, they, sent her off. No money at all. So she said, how am I supposed to go to Japan? They gave her the tickets, of course. But then nothing else. No money. They gave her a big bunch of Back to Godhead magazines. You sell this and whatever money you make, you reach Japan. She actually sold those Back to Godhead magazines in the airport. And whatever little money she made, she reached Japan. First time in her life, after she got off the airplane, she saw this boy. And she got married to him. They lived all their life together. Even now they're together. And they're such amazing Prabhupada disciples. Can you imagine what kind of surrender this is? And from being from being an actress, with so much fame, so much name, to becoming such a simple person, and that too so surrendered. When you talk about Sevaya, This is what it means. And pariprashna means submissive inquiry. As I was saying, the inquiry shouldn't be about how are you, but the inquiry should be how am I. We should know the right question to ask. So, what is the result of performing such a yajna? The understanding that the Bhagavad Gita gives is that having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never again fall into such illusion. For by this knowledge, you will see all living entities are but a part of the Supreme. In other words, that they are mine. So the first thing is, the first result of knowledge is that you get out of illusion. Today, the world is a place of illusion, where everybody is in illusion about who am I, who God is, what our relationship with God, and there is such a mess in the mind. The first result of getting transcendental knowledge is you get freedom from illusion. The second result of getting transcendental knowledge is you can easily cross the ocean of birth and death, ocean of miseries. Krishna says in the Gita, even if you are considered to be the most sinful of all sinners, when you are situated in the boat of transcendental knowledge, you will be able to cross over the ocean of miseries. So this is the second result of getting transcendental knowledge. And the third is the reactions to all our sins, they are burnt completely. Krishna says, as a blazing fire turns firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge burn to ashes all reactions to material activities. That means when we are living life based on transcendental knowledge, all the sinful reactions are destroyed. That means when you get transcendental knowledge, first is illusion is dispelled. The second is one crosses over the ocean of material existence. And third is that one's sinful reactions get destroyed. The question now is that who is qualified to get such a knowledge? Here, Shri Krishna gives a very important definition of who is qualified. He says a faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve such a knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. That means somebody who is Shraddhavan Labate. Shraddhavan Labate Jnanam. Krishna says that somebody who has faith, such a person can gain transcendental knowledge. And what is the hurdle to gain this transcendental knowledge? Krishna says, but ignorant and faithless person who doubt the revealed scriptures do not attain God consciousness. They fall down. For the doubting soul, there is no happiness either in this world or in the next. So Krishna says, Ajnanas Shraddhadanascha Samshayatma Vinashyati Nayam Lokosti na paro na sukam samshayatmanah. He says, essentially there are three types of people who have hurdles. The first type of person is Agya. Agya means somebody who is foolish, ignorant. So there are many people who come to a spiritual master who are complete fools. That means they don't have intelligence only. So if an intelligent person comes, he cannot get transcendental knowledge. As I was saying, to be able to understand transcendental knowledge, you have to have some qualification of your own already. One of the qualifications, you should have some intelligence. There are some people who are just complete fools. One time, one fellow went to a doctor, and the doctor told him, if you have to be healthy, you have to run 8 kilometers a day for 30 days. This fellow ran. After about 30 days, he called the doctor. He said, how do I come back? I have reached 240 kilometers away, The doctor said 8 kilometers a day. He kept running further and further away from his home, So if somebody is a fool, no matter how much knowledge you give to that fellow, he's not going to understand. So the first type of person who will not understand is Agya. The second type of person who will not understand is Ashraddhadhana. Ashraddhadhana means faithless person. So the first person who will not gain transcendental knowledge, he is like an animal only. No intelligence at all. The second type of people, they are not like animals, but they don't have faith. Because there are so many opinions, so many controversies, so many gods. Shiva ke paas jaun, Vishnu ke paas jaun, Krishna ke paas jaun, Ram ke paas jaun. So much confusion. On top of that, Sai Baba, then there is, this Baba, that Baba, both itna confusion hai, kya karna chahiye, you know. So essentially, first type of person is animal only because he doesn't have intelligence. Second type of person is that Ashradadana is very intelligent. Unfortunately, too much intelligence also is a problem. You have too much intelligence means you have too much options. And so much options that all life long you keep exploring only. At the end of life, you don't go anywhere. You don't reach anywhere. You neither progress nor regress. You remain hanging, you know. Typically, oh my God, PK, such movies encourage Ashradadana even more, you know. First of all, one fellow is confused. On top of it, you see the movie, you get even more confused, you know. You just don't understand what is right and what is wrong. And therefore, such people are unlimited in today's world. And the third type of person is Samshayatma. So first fellow is Agya, he is a fool. Second fellow has too much doubts, you know, because he is over intelligent. And third fellow is a doubting soul. Samshayatma means doubting soul. In the Bible, Jesus calls us as doubting Thomas. So doubting souls are in a particular category where they constantly doubt everything that comes in front of them. And therefore, with such doubts, one can never really progress. Krishna says that one who acts in devotional service, renouncing fruits of his actions, and whose doubts have been destroyed by transcendental knowledge, is situated factually in the self. Thus, he is not bound by the reactions of work. So, essentially, at this point of time, Krishna is insisting, telling Arjun, stop doubting. He tells him, you think that by killing Bhishma, killing Drona, killing Kripacharya, you are going to hell. I am telling you, you will not go to hell. So Krishna is telling Arjun, don't doubt my words. Don't doubt the Vedas. Don't be a doubting soul. So many times, a living entity tends to doubt too much. And what is the way in which we deal with these doubts? The doubts have to be dealt with by knowledge. Therefore, Krishna says in this one of the last verses of this chapter, therefore, the doubts which have arisen in your heart out of ignorance should be slashed by the weapon of knowledge. Armed with yoga, O Bharata, stand and fight. So here, Krishna is encouraging Arjun that there is a big demon of doubt in the heart. First kill that demon before you go and kill all your enemies. So here, essentially, when we kill the doubts that are there in our heart, we can do yajna for the pleasure of Krishna easily. And what is the yajna that Krishna is recommending Arjun to do? Sacrifice all his relatives. Sacrifice his attachment to his relatives. Sacrifice his attachment to his, pride of being knowledgeable. So here, Krishna is telling Arjun that you have two choices. One, be a doubting soul and you get stuck in the cycle of birth and death. Second, be an intelligent person overcoming doubts through the transcendental knowledge. And when you have no doubts, especially when you have utter faith in the spiritual master's words, in Krishna's words, then you don't think so much. You don't have to think so much. You have to think till you come to this point of having faith. But once you have faith, stop thinking. Just do what is told to you. Unfortunately, all life long we remain doubting souls. All life long we remain in this position of samshayatma. It is very easy to overcome agya through knowledge. It is very easy to overcome ashradadana. Ashradadana is like a person who is having faithless. But samshayatma, overcoming the quality of being doubting every small thing, that is very difficult to overcome. And that can be overcome by having faith in the spiritual master's words, faith in Krishna's words. And when we have this faith in the transcendental knowledge and gain transcendental knowledge, then it's easy to overcome. And then the grace of the spiritual master descends into our life. This is the difference between Karna and Krishna and Sudama in Srimad Bhagavatam. Karna, he acted as if he was a very, very good disciple, but eventually his discipleship started with the concept of cheating his spiritual master. But Krishna and Sudama, they were totally surrendered to the spiritual master's words. They had no doubts about the spiritual master's words, and therefore when Krishna and Sudama, they served the spiritual master, they did all pranipat, pariprashna and sevaya. When they served the spiritual master was so pleased with them that spiritual master actually gave them the benediction that whatever they studied, they will remember forever, and they will be able to recall whenever they want. So essentially, when we gain knowledge, by the weapon of knowledge, we can slash our doubts. But that ability to use that weapon of knowledge, it comes by the spiritual master's grace. The spiritual master's grace, when we actually approach him with complete surrender and complete faith. So I'll just summarize everything we spoke in this whole chapter. We started this chapter by talking about eternal education. We spoke about how Krishna spoke this knowledge to Vivaswan, the sun god, and how this knowledge was lost. And then eventually Krishna had to establish a parampara to get this knowledge again. We spoke about the different types of paramparas. And then we spoke about how an avatar can be recognized. And then we spoke about accurate understanding, where Krishna speaks about 3 misunderstandings. He clarifies. The first misunderstanding is all paths lead to the same goal. Krishna speaks about how all paths don't lead to the same goal, they lead to different goals. And then Krishna spoke about the second misunderstanding of God and demigods, how God is different from the demigods. And then Krishna spoke about the third misunderstanding, which is the Varnashram system, that is the caste system. And then R stands for reactions to karma. We spoke about in detail about the different processes, the law of karma in great detail. And then finally Krishna speaks about the different types of sacrifices: Dravyamaya Yagya, Tapamaya Yagya, Yogamaya Yagya, Jnanamaya Yagya, etc. And then he says that all these sacrifices, all these yagya, is for the purpose of pleasing Krishna, pleasing the Supreme Lord. And then he says that these yagyas, these sacrifices, have to be done based on knowledge. And this knowledge is gained by giving up doubts, because doubts are the worst. And to slash this demon of doubts, one has to have transcendental knowledge. And this transcendental knowledge comes into a person's life when one surrenders to the spiritual master, and he does this concept of pranipat, pariprashna and sevaya. And when the spiritual master is pleased with the disciple, the demon of doubts can be slashed very easily. Hare Krishna. With this we end the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita.